What's up?
Where are you right now?
I'm in LA.
Very nice. Is that home for you these days, or where do you bounce between?
No, I couldn't live in LA. I live in Denver.
Oh, okay.
So I kind of split time between Denver and upstate New York in the Catskills.
Okay.
So yeah, I like it chill when I'm off the road.
Different inspiration, do you find, or different energies creatively when you're in different cities?
Yeah, I mean, there's like that old song I grew up with said LA was like Nashville with a tan, where it's like there's a lot of ambition in certain cities that it's kind of like it takes over your own style without even realizing, you know. So Denver is a lot more like everybody's a lot more they're into other things, so it's less of like a big deal to them, no matter what you're up to. And New York's full of big deals, so you could walk down the street, and you're probably like the fifth most important person on that block. So it's not like celebrity driven at all. Like LA can feel kind of obsessed with that. I love being around like real and interesting people, and we often joke that like our favorite people are like not other musicians to hang out with, but like a plumber or my neighbor in New York's like a great hunter and trapper, and that's what my dad did. So I like talking to him about this. It's just those people like they just care if you're like an upstanding person. They don't really care about like music and accolades or anything like that. So it's kind of nice because it's like you're getting evaluated as a human being and not like your resume or something.
So is that a really important factor for you of like keeping, and the term's kind of cliche, but like real humans around you? Do you feel like that kind of keeps you very human in what you do?
I think it's just kind of a trap to drink your own Kool-Aid and to, not believe how like fine of an edge it is to walk to, every album we put out, Jared and I want that album to be the best thing we've ever done. And our biggest fear is to release something that we figure out later was just delusional. We want to feel like we're making something that to us is objectively good. Now that will always change. There's people who like hate whole styles of music and love other styles that I might be the opposite on. But I'm saying within our world, like I want to write music that I'd still want to play in 20 years because I'm proud of it. And, I feel like for the most part, we've been able to do that over the last 20 years together. And it's nice because it's not for everybody, but the people that get it, they really connect with it. And I feel like being around people, I think selfishly, the best stories come from those real interactions, and those real, even if it's a hand-me-down story you get from somebody telling you about their life, it is so special to really get to meet someone, and hear about what they've been through. I mean, in your line of work, it's like the best interviewers get the human side of the interviewee. It's like Howard Stern is a legend that he became it later in his life, but it was an example of like everybody that went on his show when I'd listen, even if I didn't like them necessarily. Going into it, I'd always kind of just really come around to them because they weren't putting up these walls,
Hmm.
and that's so much of touring too. Is like you get to meet real people that are like living their lives, and their lives are fascinating to the outsider, but to them they're just every day is like well, this is my life. So, and that could be true of musicians too. Like you
Yeah.
could play a lot of gigs and then someone's like, this is crazy, you're backstage, but that's just like that's where you stay when you're at the venue. So there's like a there's like a shared awe of each other when you're around people that aren't in your line of work.
Yeah, it reminds me of a saying that it's funny that you bring up the. I guess it kind of comes back to listening. I had a mentor in the industry that said, "Are you listening to speak, or are you listening to actually listen?" Because half the time we're always preparing about, what are we trying to say next, and when you stop yourself to really absorb what's in front of you or who you're with, you end up learning a lot more about a person. I wonder if that kind of plays on both sides of what we do.
Yeah, I mean, and my dad was he's a psychologist, so I think he was really gifted at like not only listening but getting people to like tell him truths, not like tell them what they wanted him to hear or something. It's a real skill, like active listening. It's very annoying when you're around someone that they're only thinking about their smart response. It's not a conversation. It's a bit of like an ego, like showing off thing. Or so, yeah, it's rare when you meet people that can like hold that space and be like you just referenced, not always thinking of the next thing to say.
Exactly. And being able to say, I'm done with this thought. Should we move on to the next one? And, I know that we're here obviously promoting Automatic, the new album. Album 5. I'm curious if Because the last time we got a full project would have been back during the pandemic. What is your perspective like now on the other side of it, creatively, for inspiration, anything, songwriting as well? Do you have a new take on anything now that we're kind of out of that bubble?
Yeah, I mean, just not even including that. My daughter was born, so I have a 7-year-old son and a daughter who's about to turn 4.
Oh,
And I think that shifts anyone's life a lot as far as, they sort of your biggest teacher. It teaches you a lot about, okay, I'm not really like feeling as much awe as they are every day. What's up with that? Like, or I'm getting really frustrated with my son because he's exactly like me and I don't like that. There's a lot of like Rorschach stuff going on when the kids are involved, that it reveals a lot more about you and when you say how you feel about something. So I've learned a lot from them and through them. And then I think the pandemic was as sort of a collective trauma that everybody endured together. And it truly divided a lot of people in a very surprising way, like how fragile everything was. And we didn't realize it. Like we're all just, everything seems smooth, and yet all of it can be knocked off its axis by this thing. And everybody has a different idea how to fix that. I think that was very shocking to most of us. And then getting back to it, I think one of the biggest surprises out of all this was the return with a vengeance to like going back to live music. Like I think a lot of us who play music thought a lot of people are scared of one another right now. How are we going to get people to come to venues and do this thing that's so special to us selfishly? Like how can we have shows again? And then coming out of that, there was like a thirst or a hunger for it that I don't think most people saw coming. And it's continued on. And I would like to think I'm sort of like in some ways, really, idealistic and hopeful in my style, like in how I'm just naturally wired. And I was like, perhaps this is that people learned that music was not a luxury, it was a necessity. It's like it's a huge part of a lot of people's lives, and gathering in that way around music with one another, it does something to you that you don't get putting in your headphones and riding a subway. It's like a completely different experience. It borders on like a religious experience for some of us as far as like going to shows. So that was some of my most formative memories. So I hope people saw music differently after that, in a way that you couldn't have known had it been taken away, the ability to go to shows and things like that.
Do you feel like that change in perspective that you mentioned in the demand and how grateful we are to be doing this, did that play a role as well in the album coming together? Because I believe, and I don't have the quote here, but it was less than a month that Automatic kind of came together.
Yeah, it was 21. We were in the studio for 21 days. So for us, that's very fast, because songs can take 4 or 5 days to work out. So if you multiply it out by 10 or 11 songs. So we were flying. But a lot of why it went fast was because we were, instead of multi-tracking and recording instruments separately, we were recording in a room together and sort of letting things breathe. And I would say the gift of it was like, if I'm playing something and I'm affecting the drummer is affected by that, and then that affects me back. There's this kind of beautiful ripple effect of playing live together that I don't think we had the skill or the confidence to do 20 years ago or 10 years ago, but it felt really easy this time. And the performances were more exciting because you were right on that edge of like, I don't know, it's like, if people don't necessarily understand that part of it, it's like, imagine when you watch a movie and it's all one take. It's like that, where every actor knows that if they screw it up, you just have to start the whole scene over and reset the whole thing. So I think there's a danger to that in a very cool way, that the actors in that case, in that analogy, but in music, when you're recording that way, you're bringing something out of yourself that's a little more on alert and primal than if you're just, I can do this take 100 times, no matter what, it'll be okay. And I think that we got a lot out of that. That made us feel like kids, in the
And
studio.
and does that also, in a way, and I mean, I know that art and especially music can be such a subjective medium with what you take out of something, but I found listening to the last few records compared to Automatic, this does feel a lot more direct, like a lot of topics that even I went like, oh wow, like if it's overstimulation, if it's trying to numb those sad feelings, is it scary diving into that in such a deep level, especially when maybe there were more metaphors kind of in the lyrics beforehand? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you're dead on. I mean, I think for me, to be as honest or transparent as I can. Like, so it was almost like, so the last few years, there's a few different artists we've met, but the ones that like come to mind immediately are like Noah Khan and Zach Bryan, who came to us and said, what you've done has influenced us in this way, and thank you for what you've done. And we were like, it made us pay attention to what they were doing, because I often just look way further back. I like listen to much older artists, like classic rock almost, like, and modern artists often are like not vetted in my head, so I'm not sure if they're good or not. So I kind of go backward, like almost like if you're reading novels, you start with like Steinbeck or and there's probably great modern writers, but I'm like, well, I don't know if they're so. Anyway, I paid more attention to what they were up to by just the bond they created by being vulnerable to us and saying, hey, like, you had this impact on us. And then I was really inspired by how honest and forthright they were in their writing about themselves. And it made me say, like, they kind of raised the bar of like what you can do in the medium and what your job is, like as an artist, as a singer songwriter. It's, yes, you can communicate through opaque kind of poetic things, but you can also, you really get to the point sometimes and reveal some stuff that's not always convenient about yourself, and that could be the good stuff. And maybe that's somewhere I hadn't always gone, and I was inspired by them and some of the ways that they were doing that. And you have to do it in your own way or it's not going to work. But I felt like a lot of that stuff was kicking around pretty hard in my head about watching my kids grow up in a world where, I'm at the playground with them, for, let's say, and they're having these like, I just went down this slide and I'm on my phone and I'm like trying to make a purchase on Amazon or something to use my time as well as I can. I'm missing this thing that I'll never get back in a way because of this highly addictive, diabolically designed device that imagine what they're going to be up against when they keep perfecting it. And I was like playing with the idea of, okay, you have this automatic response almost in a way of like staring at our phones and sort of algorithmically manipulated or predictive behavior, mixing that with being a parent and automatically loving my kids. Like I didn't have any say in the matter. It was like, and that's a beautiful side of things. It's also really inconvenient because I would literally, I don't know if I could go on if something happened to one of them. So it's like you realize you're so vulnerable to more pain, but you also have like the highest high by having kids and by truly like loving someone more than yourself. So there was like all of this weird stuff kicking around of like being highly stimulated. People almost, you've never been more lucky than to be born in this time. But if you polled the people, they'd tell you they're the most unhappy. So they tell you it's the most conflicted time. We're just in an odd time, and so I think there's almost a humor to that to me. There's like an absurdity to that I think the record dances around, plays with a little bit. And I was trying to also poke fun at, or yeah, like be a little bit self-aware enough to point out some of my own deficiencies and like things that are kind of silly about myself that I'm not proud of or something. But in the context of it, it's pretty relatable. Like when I would, like, there's a line in one of the songs that says watching porn and real estate. And it's like, it's funny because no one would say that at a dinner party, let's say, but everybody's doing that in different ways. And, my wife always tells me, why did you say that? Like, you just totally killed the conversation. Like, so in the same old song, it's like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I killed the mood so naturally. Like, it's like almost like I set out to screw up the vibe. And I'm just thinking, wouldn't it be fun to debate this really hot topic, this really third rail subject? And everybody's like, no, 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 no. So I think in some ways I was trying to like have a laugh at my own expense in some weird way and explore that a little bit, because it's not something I'm like I hate about myself, but it is something that I've noticed people get annoyed by. And I don't mean anything by it, but I annoy people sometimes. And I think everybody can relate to that. Like, geez, man, land the plane, finish the story.
But it's funny because I think that, back to what you're saying about the algorithm, I think it teaches us to jump very fast. Like the moment a conversation is steering a certain way, it's like, okay, now I have to immediately guard up, and it makes it
Yeah.
hard to kind of talk about the nuances. So I see that completely. Do you find that, like, is it hard to tap into that part of you when you are being more direct, or is that something you kind of have to work your way into?
I think it was I don't think it was particularly hard if it felt like true, if it was like authentic. Like the song Asshole is a autobiographical song about people thinking I was an asshole because I could be pretty um shy or unreserved about my opinion even if I don't know you that well. So it's a combination of like aloof mixed with like maybe I give off the vibe that I don't care about your feelings or something, but I'm actually just I think sometimes the most compassionate thing is to tell someone the truth, and other people have other ideas of what compassion is. So it's like it to me that was like okay to acknowledge that people think that about me, and yet the next line is like, uh, you might be correct. You're probably correct, but I can see your shadow. Like I know you have a dark side. It's just if you want to talk about it, that's your call. But like you're happy to, I don't trust people that as much that aren't letting me know some inconvenient things about themselves over the course of a friendship. Like I kind of got to know that, or I feel like I'm in a relationship with like a serial killer where there's like a double life here. And it's a true like when I met my wife, she was so good at breaking down my wall and other people's walls by just being vulnerable in a really authentic way. It was almost like a CIA agent, though. She could like spend 5 minutes with someone. I come back, the person would be like sharing their deepest, and it's like that's a real skill to connect with people and to make them feel safe to share that. And I think I noticed by watching her that a lot of it had to do with her talking about something that the person can sense she didn't have to share, and it wasn't flattering, and they're like, oh, we can do that, because so much of, let's say, being a parent or being a musician or whatever is flexing that you're not stupid or that you're awesome at this or whatever. And so it's really refreshing when someone is willing to like reveal those things, and it I think it gives permission to the other side to do the same. So it's like this cool exchange, but it takes someone to initiate that, and sometimes both people don't know how. So you kind of just never meet each other, and you can hang out all night, but you never really get to know the person.
Yeah, like it takes one person to show you that it's safe being who you are, whether that be the good or the bad. You don't
Yeah,
have to put on a face, I guess, around hopefully the world, but around that one person, ideally.
yeah. I mean, it's similar to like the mode of a rock star, the mode of an entertainer, a musician has vastly shifted over the years, but there will still always be a place for just like antics, stuff that's just like not real, but it's like, hey, everybody, I'm crazy guy, like, and that's true for like a small fraction of the entertainers that exist, but a lot of them are just like obsessed with music, and then they're forced to be entertainers. And I feel like I'm more of a writer than anything else, and I love that the world like has sort of made enough room for me and Jer and the band to like not have to do those things that make us feel like cringe. That like it's evolved a lot because I felt like there were eras of music, and people had to break those things down before the music industry would accept that you could actually like sell music to people without having to completely change who you were fundamentally.
Hmm.
So like I think I'm very happy that I feel like when people meet me, it's not a shock at how I act and who I am if you listen to music and if you come to a show, because it feels like a vibe. And it's not like I'm exactly the same as with my kids or with my mom or on stage, but there's like a through line that old entertainment was like so fake about some of it. And I think that's another example of like I feel really happy to be a musician born today, because you can have like all these different types of music that can all like dominate in their own way, and there's more room for it, and there's not just like the haves and the have nots. There still exists that for plenty, don't get me wrong, but there's room for a Tame Impala and a Mac DeMarco and a Father John Misty and a Tori Moi and a there's just so much variation in what's popular. These aren't just like obscure bands. These are like St. Vincent, like, and those bands making the music that they make wouldn't have much of a shot in a certain era of music. And now you have this like rich, um, deep pool to pull from of what do you want to listen to? Look at all this stuff. So I feel like we're in a really beautiful time, like a fertile era for that. And I feel like we've received the byproducts of that by in the Lumineers. I don't think the Lumineers are the Lumineers in like the '90s. It just wouldn't. It's not. It just didn't fit, or the '80s or something. It's like timing's everything in life, and I'm just glad,
Oh
like
yeah.
I'm glad that we have a shot, and that's all like most bands ever want. It's not like we need to go back to having five big bands in the world and that's it. This is a better time.
Do you think, you said something in there that it kind of inspired me about how, you don't really feel like you've kind of shifted away from what makes you you. Like that's kind of what I took a bit from it. Do you feel like you and Jeremiah, now that's been 20 years of working together, does that relationship and how close you guys are also play a role in the progress that you make, in your honesty, in the lyricism? Like, is it kind of the more you work together, the more you unlock?
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated, right? Like I think every great band that I've always admired, there's a like underlying tension. It's like part of the deal. And I don't think we're immune to that. I think there's always going to be a tension because we come from different places musically. But the longer you sort of make it work, it's like even if there's tension, it doesn't mean the boat's sinking, or it can even be an advantage. It could be like off of that, you can create these things. You're not trying to outdo each other, but you're also like that person's just coming from a much different perspective. And that's why it works. But it's also why you can annoy each other, or that's why it complements each other well. If we like to do the same things, I don't think it would be the same result. So in a way, you're sort of learning over time to value each other because of that. Like instead of resenting the differences, you can say, "Well, I don't get this without that," so I can accept the whole. It might be really annoying sometimes for each of us, but like the alternative is to go it alone. When I know how great it is collaborative in a collaborative way, you start to go, well, "This is great." Like, yeah, everyone's going to change something about whoever's in their life, but this is a special thing to be, you want to try to like cherish it in a way while you're still relatively young and while you're still can enjoy it and not just look back and be like, I wish I was, I wish I just, in that moment could see what I had. So I think we're both trying to do that a little bit in real time because we see our kids, we each have kids around the same age and they're growing like weeds just so fast. And you see it's all going to happen. We're growing right there with them. You think you're like suspended in time, but you're getting old just like they're getting older. So the whole thing is a trip. Like it's taught Jared and I both a lot about like what it is that even if there's differences, like maybe the wisdom is like being like, yeah, but you don't get that without this. It's like athletes. There's certain athletes that have these quirks, but that's also like why you have to be kind of crazy to want to do it. So there's a similar thing of pursuing music where what gave you the thought that your voice even mattered enough to say, you know what I mean? Like there's an audacity there that
Yeah.
it's not arrogance, but it's like a little bit like you're a little bit delusional. Like, but maybe you could tap into that and use it to your advantage.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I've been going to therapy for many years. Like I imagine a lot of us do, and it's what did she say one time? It was like, if you wouldn't stress about it, if you were about to get hit by a bus, you probably
Yeah.
don't need to win every single battle. And it's like it seems like compromise. Like if it's a romantic relationship with friends, kids, or your work partner in crime, it just takes learning I guess what hill's worth dying on.
Yes, totally.
I could ask you
Yeah,
questions for days. Could I ask one
absolutely.
last quick question, then I'll let you go. Um, what one line through the whole record stands out as just like being the most important to you, just carries the message of where you're at right now?
Man. Hmm. I would say I would say you're all I got. It's very simple, but Excuse me. I just burped if the listeners can hear that.
Marcus, do we record that? That's $1 million burp, my friend.
I would say you're all I got. I just like the simplicity of it, and it's something Jared had sent me, and it's kind of like what I love about our relationship is like I don't need to be the one to come up with the line every time. I write most of the lyrics, but he has these gems come out of him every so often, and I thought that was so like it said something without trying so hard to be profound. It was, and whether it's my musical relationship with him over 20 years, my kids, me and my wife, it's like they are all I got in different ways, and in some ways that sucks to admit because you just want to feel strong on your own. But on the flip side, you'll never get to the heights without having that vulnerability in your life and exposing yourself to the highs and lows of it. So I love that line. Man.
Aw. No, honestly, that was so profound. I might like need a moment now. Jeez, now that we're wrapping up, I'm like just.
I'll burp again if you need me to.
No, Wesley, man, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. And if you're ever back Vancouver on the coast, please
For
come for
sure.
a visit.
Yeah,
soon.
we're gonna come back and play. We don't know we're gonna figure out those dates. A lot of our fans have been like mad that we've only played Toronto announcements so far, but we're gonna hit everywhere. Don't worry. So we'll be seeing you soon.
Yeah, yeah. No, it seems like Seattle. It seems like a lot of people are looking at that show so far. But if it ever comes up
Yes. No,
here,
we'll make our way
take
north.
it.
Don't worry. We'll definitely be. We'll be over there soon. But thank you for the time. Appreciate it, man.
Okay, have a good one. Oh, he's so profound.